Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Elizabeth Chance podcast, formerly known as Busy Living Sober. It is episode 376 with Teri MacGilbert. And she also is known as Sassy Sober Mum. And she also has Thrive. She's written
Yes.
a book called Thrive. So much on your plate.
Yeah, that's right. And I've also got my Thrive Sober online women's community. And I'm also host of my own podcast, which is called Sober Stories from Everyday People.
I love that. And you've been doing this for how many years?
So I've been sober for 4.5 years. And probably the last 2 years, I've been more actively engaged in the sober community and the sober world. My podcast is just over a year old, and my Thrive Sober community will celebrate a year anniversary in November. And I also have been coaching women one-to-one for about 7 months, so kind of most of this year. And I've been active on Instagram for a few years now. So I used to post every day, lots and lots of kind of a bit like online blogging really, but on Instagram with lots of photos, lots of dodgy photos of me when I used to drink.
Well, before we go any further, I have to give a shout out to SoberLink. Getting sober is a lifestyle change, and sometimes a little technology can help. Imagine a breathalyzer that works like a habit tracker for sobriety. SoberLinks helps you replace bad habits with healthy ones, weighing less than a pound and as compact as the sunglass case. SoberLink devices have built-in facial recognition, tamper detection, and advanced reporting, which is just a fancy way of saying it keeps you honest. On top of that, results are sent instantly to loved ones to help you stay accountable. I've been a recovery coach for a long time, and I can't think of a better tool to help people to rebuild confidence and trust. Go after your goals. Visit www.soberlink.com/BLS to sign up and receive $50 off your device. So I want to go back. From today. You're outside of London, outside of England, outside of London somewhere. Is that where you are?
Yeah, I'm on the south coast of England by the seaside in a place called Poole in Dorset, which is about 2.5 hours from London.
Okay, fabulous. And have you lived there your whole life?
No, I was born in the Midlands, so the middle of England, raised in a very small village. And yeah, originally I'm from a place called Leicester, but I moved down to London in my late teens. And then eventually I moved down to the South Coast in my mid-20s. And I've been here ever since. So crazily, that's coming up to 20 years already.
Isn't it crazy? Time just
Yeah.
flies.
Yeah.
And you got married, right?
Yeah, I got married recently, actually. Yeah, I was a bride for the first time in my 40s. I'm very proud of that. And also a sober bride, which I'm also very proud of. I got married 2 years ago.
But I want to go back before that. So you have 2 little girls from a previous relationship.
That's right. So in total, I have 3 daughters, 2 from a previous relationship. They are 8 and 10. And then I have little Sadie, who's 2.5, and she is a child with my husband.
That's so beautiful.
Yeah, little girl gang.
It's amazing. So I want to ask you, because I have a different story than you do, right? I've been sober for 17 years, and
Wow.
and I have I went through Alcoholics Anonymous because that was all that there was. I just gotten divorced. I had 3 little babies, and they were 10, 8, and 6 at the time. And there was no, I was like, what am I gonna do? I'm gonna quit drinking. I can't do this anymore. I've given up. It's too much. I can't be a single mom and do all this stuff with these kids. What am I gonna do? How am I gonna find friends? And there was no other option but to go to Alcoholics Anonymous. Now, did you have, I have this big question. Is there any other alcoholics in your family?
Yeah, I think my mum, she wasn't diagnosed alcoholic, but and she's not alive either anymore. And I actually wasn't in touch with her. We were estranged throughout all my adult life. So it's difficult for me to put that kind of label on her, I suppose, but she certainly had a very problematic relationship with drinking. And, that did impact me as a child. And I do remember my parents arguing about her hiding bottles and some of the kind of more typical behaviors, I suppose, of an alcoholic. So I do think my mom was an alcoholic.
Because for me, it was such a big thing to find out, why did I get this? Why can't I be like normal people? Where did this start? And I
Yeah.
knew that both my grandmothers were alcoholic.
Yeah. Yeah, to be honest, I almost feel like, but surely that must come in the line at some point for everyone, because alcohol is so widely available, and it's very understandable why you would get addicted to it. I mean, I think one of the messages I'm always trying to emphasize is, it's not your fault that you get addicted to alcohol. I do think that there is predisposition if you had certainly genetically alcoholic parents or grandparents, but sometimes I wonder, if you go back far enough down the line, there's probably always someone in that line that was an alcoholic at some point. And I think that in this day and age, it is a legalized drug. It is very easy to get hold of. It is very acceptable socially. In fact, you are the strange one if you don't drink. That is the culture that we live in at the moment. And that's all wrong. That's unsupportive if you have a problematic relationship. And for me personally, I don't identify as alcoholic. I identify as a gray area drinker. And I know these are just labels, and everybody is allowed to identify how they wish. But for me, I was somebody that I could moderate, and but it was a lot of effort, but I could do it. But alcohol I just realized, I connected the dots, and I just realized that it was impacting my life in a negative way. I was feeling rubbish too often in the week, and I was curious to try and discover, like, there's got to be more to life than this. Like, this can't just be it. That's kind of how I think I felt when I was at the point when I stopped drinking.
I felt the same exact way. Like, I just, I didn't have any of those things that happen, right? Like, I mean, I was divorced, but I still had a house. I still had some money in the bank. Not a lot, but I did. And I had a roof over my head with my kids. But it was like, oh my gosh, now what am I going to do? Now that I want to quit, where am I going to go and find friends?
Yeah.
So is that when you decided to start posting your everything on Instagram, your little blog or vlog, as they call it?
Yeah, I think that, look, and maybe you relate to this, but for me in the beginning, when I went into this journey, it was under a cloud of shame. I felt bad, like you said earlier, that I couldn't be normal, in inverted commas. I realize now that there is no normal, and I am perfectly normal, whether I drank too much or not. I'm still perfectly normal, but my opinion of myself was that I wasn't normal at the time, and you didn't have any sober friends. I was very much the only person in my kind of group of friends that was even contemplating not drinking, and I felt like an outsider because of that. The one thing that I think I had in my favor was that my husband, he's not a big drinker. He very much takes it or leaves it. He drank a lot as a 20s, and with friends on holidays to Tenerife and all that stuff. But when he got towards his 30s, he just kind of, in his words, he grew out of it, which is something I think I always thought I would do, but I didn't. And so he had a very different relationship to alcohol. And I think up until that point, I'd always gravitated towards other you know, big drinkers or big party people. And so all of my friends and my previous relationships were all very focused on going out and drinking and dinner parties and all that stuff. So he was the first person to make me realize that there, you know, it doesn't have to just be one way. Like, what, there's not one shape to how this drinking thing looks. And whilst he never said anything to me to encourage me to quit or anything, I just started to notice that when I wanted to pour wine after work, he was just pouring orange squash, and that my wine just looks I started to feel like, why, you know, I started questioning, why do I need this? Like, why can't I just have an orange squash and a bar of chocolate? Like, why do I need to have wine? And so I think he was the person that I could not make my sober friend, but I could sound off to him a bit and share a lot of the journey with him, and that helped me immensely, I think. But I think one of the reasons why I set up the community, to be honest, is because people that comment on my posts, so if you follow me on Instagram, you know that my style is quite kind of raw. I like to share the unglamorous bits of drinking and getting sober. I don't want to be too polished and kind of like, hey, this is all amazing, you know, do it. But I post a lot of the things that I've realized now resonate with people so much because they're afraid to say those things out loud. And I think that sharing of that shame just helps people feel seen. And I think that's really important. So people would comment on my post saying, oh, you know, I wish that I could have sober friends, and da-da-da. And I did understand that because I didn't have that for a couple of years. And so that's kind of what really helped me to kind of spark this idea that, well, maybe I could create an alternative AA, essentially, which is an online community full of resources and tools that I can write based on my experience and my training, and, you know, bring these people together in a safe place to be able to connect with other people who just get it. And I think that there's a lot in that, and that's kind of why Thrive exists.
I love that. And so what is gray area drinking compared to alcohol? Because it is semantics, I think. Am I right that it's pretty much just semantics? Because
well, I think where it comes from, and for me, when I learned about this, it really connected with me, and it seems to really connect with an awful lot of my followers as well. So I think traditionally there's always been this black and white view of drinking. You're either an alcoholic or you're a normal drinker, and that is just unrealistic. You know, just because you're not an alcoholic doesn't mean that you can take it or leave it, and it doesn't mean that you don't have a problematic relationship. So I think what the gray bit is the bit in between the black and white. So if you imagine white end of the spectrum is people like my husband, he can just have 2 ciders a year and that's all he wants. And then there's people maybe in the black that are alcohol dependent, and they may need alcohol or large quantities of alcohol every day to cope. You know, they can't miss a day without alcohol, for example. So there's an actual physical dependency there. And if that person doesn't drink, maybe they get the shakes and all those sorts of things. But then there's this bit in the middle, which is the grey area. So it's kind of going from white to black, this grey bit. And that grey bit is, again, difficult to define. But for example, it hasn't got anything to do with the frequency or the volume of what you drink. It's actually to do with how it might be making you feel. So for example, I always class myself as a bit of a no-off switch drinker. I didn't have to drink every day, but a lot of the time I had to really heavily moderate, or I had no off switch. So if I go out on a Friday night, I'm drinking until I fall over type of, you know, behavior. So, you know, I could be sometimes in what I like to class the mid-grey, or I could I could flip between the mid and the dark grey, or the light, the mid and the dark grey. It might be that someone has to drink 2 glasses of wine every night. They very much see themselves perhaps as not having an issue with alcohol, but yet they can't not have that 2 glasses. So that's also problematic. And we are actually starting to realize that that moderate drinking is just as dangerous as heavy weekend binge drinking, because you never allow your liver to detox. You're literally topping it up every single day. That would be gray area drinking. Maybe you only go out once a month, but you go out and you have a massive bender and you can't stop. Maybe you then start to take drugs, or, you know, and you wake up and you have terrible anxiety. Or maybe you're using wine to cope with life. So, you know, you're one of these people that's like, I've had a really stressful day, I need a glass of wine. You know, that would be kind of grey area drinking. You're not taking or leaving it in that situation. You're not arriving at an event and someone's offering you a glass of champagne and you're thinking, shall I have that or shan't I? I'm not that bothered. Maybe, okay, I'll just have one. You know, you're using alcohol to change your state. So I think there are lots of different forms, and that's why personally I really like this grey area, or another way of calling it is middle lane drinking, which I think a lot of people sit in. And this is sometimes where I feel challenged. I feel, unfortunately, for whatever reason, alcoholic has a stigma. You know, it's a word that people don't like. I don't love it, to be honest. It's a word that people don't like. And I do think that people should be able to have the sort of, you know, the label, you know, that they want to choose that helps them. I worry that if people don't identify as an alcoholic, they then won't seek help for problematic drinking behaviors because they don't feel like they're that bad, in inverted commas. But there's someone like me going on about grey area drinking and, you know, this is what it could look like. And do you have some of these behaviors? If so, that is an okay reason to look at your drinking and to make decisions around stopping. And I think more people have embraced sobriety in that grey area drinking zone than leaving it until it's got very, very, very tough. And, you know, you're more into the dark grey black. And then it's such a big problem that you might need medical intervention, etc.
Okay, for one, I just have to tell you, I just love everything you're doing. And it's so crazy because again, I was exactly what you described. That was me. I was a weekend warrior. I did not, you know, I'd go out and my sister would always be like, why can't you only have 1 glass of wine, Elizabeth? I'm like, I've never had 1 glass of wine in my life. Yeah. And I'd stand outside of the bar and I'd be like, okay, I'm only gonna have 1 dirty martini. I'm only gonna have 1 dirty martini. Yeah. And then I'd like wake up and I'd be like, okay, who's he? How did he get here? Yeah. And what the hell happened all last night? Because I'm a blackout drinker. I don't remember a lot of times too. Right. So I have and I these 3 little babies. And I'm like, what am I gonna do? And that shame that you spoke about was so debilitating for me. It was like scary. I went and because I was so ashamed, I went and I got an attorney and I patented sober and not ashamed because I was so ashamed. I was so ashamed, but I'm going to say, oh, I'm not ashamed. I'm not ashamed. Everybody know I quit drinking. So I went out into my whole community where I lived outside of Philadelphia. And I told everybody, I quit drinking. I quit drinking. I quit drinking. And for better or for worse, you know, that alcoholic still has a terrible connotation. And I'm here 17 years later. I just changed the name of my podcast from Busy Living Sober because sober again, I had this woman on my podcast who has nothing to do with alcohol or drug, you know, she's just an influencer. And this woman wrote to me and she goes, I really like your stories that you have on, but I'm not sober. So I wasn't going to come and listen to your podcast.
Yeah. I get similar thing as well. I think people are choosing the language that they identify with. And, you know, initially I probably felt frustration at people commenting on my posts. You know, I would post something and I would have people saying, well, you're definitely an alcoholic. And I'd be frustrated by that because I very much feel like people are allowed to choose. And it's good that there's more language coming because, to be honest, there is not enough language. in this space to describe all the nuance of people that are just trying to cope with life. At the end of the day, if it's not drinking, it could be sugar, it could be gambling, it could be sex addiction, it could be too much scrolling on TikTok. I mean, workaholic, everybody's trying to feel good, okay? And humans are, at the end of the day, we're just trying to seek out things that are pleasurable and trying to avoid pain. And so, I think that unfortunately in this space, there is still a lot of stigma. But people are, I always feel like it's good that people feel like they can choose their language, so long as people aren't judging other people for choosing theirs. That's where I think it crosses a line. Choose the language that supports you. I've also got people that have come on my podcast that don't like saying they're sober, probably because of that very reason, because they don't identify as alcoholic and they don't want to be seen as the one having the problem. And and I understand, I do get that. For me, I used to be a drinker and now I don't drink. Like, that's literally how I see it. I used to smoke. I'm not a recovering smokeaholic. So for me, it's like the language is important, but what I think is more important is that people are opening up that language and that people are allowed to choose the way that they want to define themselves or their experience. And I think that the more that we can support that and not judge it, the better.
Well, I have to tell you that I think that what you're doing, it brings me tears to my eyes, because there's so many moms out there, and especially now since COVID, that have been dealing with this.
Yeah.
And the fact that you're so honest and so raw, like I was, but you're too, I feel like I'm like the old lady now. I'm like 17 years into this, but you are telling the young moms out there that they can do it a different way.
Yeah.
You don't have to admit that you're an alcoholic. You can say you're great. And you're giving these mommies, and more importantly, these children, the opportunity to have mommies that are there for them no matter what, which was the most important thing for me. I was talking to somebody last week and she was like, well, what made you quit? And my honest reason for quitting was because I had 3 little kids. And I was like, who's going to take care of these kids if I'm having the bag out? You know what I mean? I'm hungover and I'm hating life. And I'm like, go play in traffic. But really having an alternative to go, you know what? All these girls are doing this. And I've had people reach out to me as well on Instagram going, all right, take me through this AA thing. And I've taken them through the AA thing. And I like that there's more variety now. We aren't, as you said, pigeonholed. I was talking to somebody else the other day about, how we have these boxes that we have in life, right? You're supposed to fit in this box. And I love how you said normal, because I always say normal. And I'm like, normal to me, I don't know if you guys have Wonder Bread, but it's this really cheap bread in America that the bread comes out like this. It's like a big square and each piece is exactly the same, with the same widgets and the same everything. Now I'm multi-grain. I've got all different seeds, all different kinds of stuff on my bread. And we don't fit in boxes.
Yeah. Yeah. I think this is such a great point, because I work with a lot of women. I actually work with a lot of women that are my age, like mid-40s or kind of late 30s, 40s. And I think that the one thing that just always strikes me, the similarity in these women, is they are more often than not, they put themselves at the bottom of the pile, and they are living life in a way that's just prioritizing everybody else's needs, and they forget to stand there and say, well, hang on a minute, how do I give myself permission to do what I want? And like you say, these boxes, I agree with that so much. It's almost like that there's this set of rules and behaviors that we should, in inverted commas, conform to. And I think whilst we're trying to conform to all these things and to juggle all these balls and do all the things, be the parents, work, be a great wife, have an amazing tidy home, make the bread, then I think that whenever difficult feelings or discomfort comes up for women, a lot of the time they're using alcohol to cope with that. And actually, when you take the alcohol away, one of the things that I love doing is I like to help women just stop and take stock of their life. Like, how have you set up your life, and is that serving you? And what can you do differently to support who you really are? And have you even looked at who you really are? Do you even really know who you really are? And you'll know this, right? When you stop drinking, it's a journey, isn't it? You know, at first it's all kind of sugar cravings and trying to get better sleep, and there's all these immediate benefits or these immediate things. But then over time, you start to learn about yourself without alcohol, and you push yourself out your comfort zone a bit, or your feelings might come up and you might need to pay attention to them and feel them, you know. And for me, I got to 41 years old and I don't think I'd ever really properly processed anything in my life without drinking. Like, wine made me process everything, but it doesn't obviously really make you process everything. It just pushes it further down. So learning that at 41, I had no coping strategies. Like, I didn't know how to handle, you know, I had to learn all of that from scratch. That was, you know, it was eye-opening, it was frightening, but also extremely rewarding as well.
It's interesting because I got sober at 37. So now I'm 55.
Yeah.
I'm almost 55 in like a couple weeks. So, but what you just said, and I think is really interesting, is that we see life so black and white, as you just said. And I think the longer I stay sober, the longer I enjoy who I am as a woman and as a mother. And now my kids are gone. So my kids have been raised, they're off doing their own lives, right? All three of them are launched. And getting to this place of these feelings that we have and acknowledging them, because now I'm dealing with a whole different set of feelings, like, oh my gosh, now what am I going to do? They're gone. I don't have anybody to make dinner for. I mean, I have somebody to make dinner for, but it's not like you're making dinner for 3 people, but you're making dinner for one person. And when you decided to quit, I don't know if you list Jordan Peterson. Do you know who Jordan Peterson is?
Yeah, the name really rings a bell. Yes.
He's a psychiatrist out of Montreal, Canada. And he just had a YouTube video he quit drinking at 27. And what alcohol does, it's only 12 minutes long. I'll send it to you. I'll send it to you in an email. But it talks about how horrible alcohol is for you and the fact that it is legal. It shouldn't be legal. I mean, one of the things during COVID that drove me mad was that you could go to the liquor store, but you couldn't go to your church and pray with your friends. You couldn't meet at a school. You couldn't get your kids together, but you could go to the liquor store, bring it home. And who's the only people getting rich?
Yeah.
Are the liquor companies.
Right.
And is that crazy? And did you know that the liquor companies promote that it's difficult to get sober?
Yeah.
It's very hard.
I know, I was looking at this the other day actually, and I think it's quite mind-boggling really that the alcohol industry is currently worth $16 billion, and 6 billion of that revenue is spent on advertising and marketing, you know, to make sure that in a crisis like COVID, you know, you can't do all of these normal things, but at least you can pick up some alcohol to manage the pain. And a lot of my clients had problems with drinking in lockdown. That was the kind of turning point, I think, for a lot of people. And I remember I was sober for lockdown, which I was very grateful for, because I knew that if I was still drinking, I would have been, I think I would have got much further into the darker gray, maybe even the black, who knows, you know. It would definitely have been a free-for-all for me, because over here in the UK, it was very hot in the first lockdown, and everybody was sort of drinking at midday, barbecues on a Wednesday because everybody was furloughed. I don't know if you had that in America, but you know, this thing where people were off work, they couldn't work anymore. And it just became all about the alcohol. It was like the thread that kept us all united and connected in this global disaster. And 60% of drinkers in the UK increased their drinking during the first lockdown. And I think people are still struggling to come down from that, you know, and that's you will have noticed huge change in your amazing number of years being sober. But even for me, 4.5 years, the community is different. It's changing all the time. It's getting bigger. It's getting better. There are more influences, more podcasts, more books coming out, more social meetups and groups. And there's just, you know, there are celebrities getting sober. I think it's actually getting to the point now where it's becoming a bit glam. It's getting a bit cool not to drink, you know, which is amazing.
It's really funny you said that because, you know, like so one of the housewives from Beverly Hills just got sober and all that. But to get a little woo-woo, I think that there's this light that's shining in the world today that's not only pulling the darkness over alcohol, it's politics, it's how everything's run in the world today. Like things are becoming, the light showing, like this is what we're looking at. Like alcohol companies want you to get addicted. Nicotine companies want you to get addicted. Vape companies want you to get on vape. I mean, and there it's all the mighty
tech companies want you to get addicted as well. And this is the other thing. I think that the tech space, there are many people at the top of big tech companies that have been on podcasts, and they've been asked, do you let your children play on this app, or do you let them have this phone? They say, I would never let my kids do this, but yet they are getting paid millions of dollars for making sure that they addict your kids. So I almost feel, I was talking about this morning, actually, it's quite weird. I almost feel like it might not be in yours or my lifetime, but you know, at some point, 100 years down the line or 200 years, we're going to start going in reverse. We're actually going to start going backwards because everything will get too much. There's too much overabundance, too much tech interfering with everything. And people will just want to go back to like growing potatoes in their back garden and making their own clothes. And honestly, I tell you, we're going to go back like thousands of years, I think, in the next couple of 100 years.
What could even happen today, because how do you deal, now that we're talking about that addiction of social media? I feel so blessed that my kids were they were at that, they were a little older, right? They didn't, the iPhones didn't really come out. The social media just started. So they didn't have this constant, like at school, like they're having a party and I wasn't invited, or this person's going out or whatever, like the makeup all the time, having to look a certain way. Like they did not have that. How are you dealing with that? Especially, I mean, your little one's too little, but your other two, and having girls, right? This is a tough thing.
Oh, this stresses me out, to be honest, all of these thoughts. How am I dealing with that? At the moment, my 8-year-old and my 10-year-old, they have phones, but they don't really have phones. So they have a phone that has no data on it or anything, like they can't access the internet. All they can do is play a few games. They have no social media accounts. They have no friends number. They have my number, so they can FaceTime me if I'm at the shop and say hello, which they love doing. Or they can FaceTime my husband or their dad. That's it. So I think at the moment for me, my girls are still a bit younger. They're not quite, I think when my eldest goes to secondary school here, which is when she's 11 or 12, that typically tends to be the time when they take the phone with them, to school and stuff like that. So I haven't crossed that bridge yet. I'm okay with her having a phone because I worry about safety, and to be honest, I quite like the idea that I could GPS track her to make sure she got into school okay. But you know, when it comes to social media, I'm not sure if they will have those accounts straight away, because I worry about that. I worry about all of that stuff. I worry about cyberbullying and, you know, all of those things. So I think my approach is always to talk openly, be very honest. And I think I will explain to them why maybe they can have a bit of supervised access on things like what do they love? TikTok, that's the thing, isn't it? Everyone's into. Maybe they can have a bit of that, but when we're downstairs all together, they can have a look on it for half an hour, something like that. But I think it would be quite restricted, and they won't have their own accounts, maybe not until they're a bit older. So hey, who knows? You know, peer pressure is a tough thing, isn't it? So
It is. And I want to ask you, do you post every day anymore? Because I kind of noticed that you weren't, because for me, at least when I was a child, I always wanted to be just like my mom. So we see our parents constantly on the social media. We're going to want to do it. So you aren't posting. Are you like pulling back a little, do you find?
I'm very impressed that you've noticed, to be honest. Yeah, I have pulled back on that massively. This time last year, I was posting every single day without fail. Big messages, big quotes, big, pictures, big insights. And it was, it's like a full-time job doing this stuff. I think since I launched my Thrive community and the podcast, and I'm doing coaching and working the day, I can only do so much. And I have felt throughout the last, certainly this year, like I'm getting close to that point of feeling burnout, like I'm just doing too much. I've still got 3 quite young kids. I cook, clean, have a husband, all the things. And I probably realized that I don't really need to do this as much. I feel like, because I still put my podcast out there every week, you'll know this, having your own podcast, that's a free resource that's helping loads of people every week. And I feel so good about that. So I've kind of cut down my posting to 1 or 2 times a week. 2 reasons: because I feel like I'm getting to the point where I'm just doing too much in life in general, and I want to make more time for myself. I want to retrain. I want to read all the amazing books that I bought. And the second thing is, I am much more conscious of my phone use, not just with my children, but also in my relationship, because I think that we're not perfect, right? And we can all quite easily just sit down and start scrolling, the new bread maker that we fancy buying maybe in the next few months, or, you can literally find 10 reasons to look at stuff online like that straight away. And I get annoyed with myself when I get into that mindless scrolling, and my husband's sitting there scrolling on, and then my young daughter's looking at me and I'm not. So I'm trying to be more phone savvy and have less phone in my life, just in general, as a personal thing. And I suppose not posting on Instagram every day is for me to just try and back off a little bit and just give myself a bit of a break and give myself some time.
I love that.
Yeah.
Even though they're in their 20s, when they're around me and I'm on, get off your phone, mom, get off your phone. You got to pay attention to us. And I'm like,
Are they?
because I don't want to miss it, because time is so fleeting.
Yeah.
I want to ask you a question. Are you spiritual?
Yeah, very.
Okay.
Yeah, very. Yeah. And it's interesting because my husband would know that, he knows that, but not lots of people would know that, actually. I think it's a very personal thing, isn't it? But I'm very, very spiritual. Yeah, I very much believe that there is more to life. I'm not afraid of death. I'd rather not die when my kids are young or before I feel like I've lived my time, but it's not something that I'm afraid of. I think that I believe in the universe giving, the signs, the signals. I don't believe in coincidences. I really feel like we have enormous power. And I think, getting sober has helped me to find that power and to cultivate a self-belief that I've never had in my life before. I honestly think I can do anything. Sometimes my husband says, you honestly back yourself so much, Teri. I've never met anyone like you. And I'm like, I know, isn't that amazing? No, I think he's trying to say it because he thinks I'm being a big head. But I'll take it as a compliment. Oh, funny.
And my last question I have for you. Have you ever experienced a miracle?
Yeah, I think I've experienced many, if I'm being honest. I think my life's a miracle. I think my kids are miracles. I think that as I get older, and this journey that I'm on now, which is also a very spiritual one, I'm so aware of how tiny life is. It's so small. You're here for just the blip of a tiny dot on the timeline of life. And I honestly, I that's always in the forefront for me. Like, I wake up every day and think, God, I'm so lucky to be here. And this is going to go fast, Teri. I always think that this time's going fast. Like, don't worry about it. Don't worry about that. It's fine. You'll be fine. Life is fast. It's not something to worry about. So I think that probably being born into the circumstances of my life with a challenging upbringing, with a mum who was a big drinker, and created a big mother wound in my life that I've only just recently released and moved past, and accepted, and shifted the way that I've felt about that. But that hung over me my whole life, and I've made lots and lots of decisions in my life that at the time were my best, but they created a lot of pain for me. And I think that to get to where I am today, I'm in this position where, I've got this place in the sober world. I'm helping lots of people change their lives, which feels like a gift every day. To think that I could come from the situation that I was in to where I am now, I feel so successful because of that. And for me, that is a miracle. I feel like I found my way here, and here is where I'm meant to be. And I am so grateful that I opened up my eyes and saw everything for where, for what it really is. And so I think my life has been a series of miracles to get me to this point, because I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for everything that happened. And I don't regret anything at all. And I just kind of here embracing the journey. And I'm so fortunate I can share that with other people and help them set them on their path as well. So yeah, long-winded answer, but
I love that. Thank you so much for your time today. It was so wonderful meeting you, and and thank you for helping so many people and this gray area, and just the thrive, and being able to say, you know what, I found a different word that works for me. Thank you. I'm going to have a description so everybody knows where to find you. I'm going to have your links in the description. Thank you so much. And to my listeners, thank you. We all got this. We got this. We're on this road of, of life together. We all are trying to get this, you got this, right? You got this today.
Yeah. Got it. Yeah.
Got it today.
Perfect. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you so much. All right, everybody. Talk to you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.